Guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing absolutely well. Today I have a really amazing and interesting story for you guys, and I'm super excited to share it. But before we begin, if you are new here, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. It really helps me out. So now, without wasting any more time, let's get right into the video.
Look upon this world, this pale and fading marble hanging silently in the infinite, freezing dark. This was once Earth, a vibrant jewel of brilliant blue oceans and shifting green canopies, a home pulsing with life, spontaneous laughter, and the steady, generational warmth of a golden sun. But for 50 long, agonizing years, the sun has been nothing but a ghost, a myth, a bedtime fairy tale whispered by dying elders in the corners of dark barracks to children born in chains who have never seen their own shadows. 50 years ago, the sky did not merely cloud over, it tore open with the shriek of shifting tectonic plates. The leviathans of Zeta-Alpha descended upon the atmosphere not with fiery declarations of galactic war, nor with the grand, dramatic banners of conquest, but with the cold, calculated, and absolute apathy of cosmic harvesters. They did not actively desire to destroy humanity, they simply did not care if the species survived their presence. Deep within Earth's ancient metamorphic core lay ETHEL-7, a rare, volatile thermal catalyst capable of reigniting the fading core of their own dying home world. To extract this deep chemical treasure without the friction of local resistance, their terraforming vessels systematically altered Earth's troposphere, stripping the planet of its greenhouse gases and transforming the entire globe into a silent, frozen tomb. It was a permanent, artificial, and brutal ice age designed to numb the mind and freeze the blood. They built the hive prisons, massive, blockaded, towering fortresses of black industrial iron and reinforced carbon steel where all of humanity was systematically herded, catalogued, and confined like livestock. Inside these gargantuan hives, human life was reduced to a bleak, rhythmic, and entirely mechanical routine. Millions of glowing, faceless, and soulless automated sentinels managed the daily movements of the populations. The grandfather quickly averts his gaze, his voice cracking under the weight of a lifetime of despair, telling the child not to look outside because there is nothing but the frost and the white teeth of monsters waiting in the storm. For the old man, surviving until the next ration cycle is their only victory now, and they must learn to accept the cold weight of the iron. For 2 full generations, humanity did exactly that, they accepted the iron. Their collective spirits were crushed, their blood running slow and cold, matching the dead, frozen wasteland that lay outside their prison walls. But the architects of Zeta-Alpha made one fatal, fundamental mistake in their cosmic calculations. They forgot that when you push humanity into absolute, unyielding darkness, you do not destroy their spark, you compress it, pressure it, and trap it until it ceases to be a flicker and becomes a volatile, exploding star. Deep in the forgotten, flooded maintenance underbelly of Sector 4, where the mechanical sentinels rarely patrolled due to the rusted standing water and conflicting magnetic interference, a different kind of fire was burning. In a ruined, subterranean classroom hidden away behind rows of collapsed steam pipes, 5 teenagers gathered in the dark, illuminated only by the faint orange glow of a hacked heating element. They were true children of the ice, born inside the black walls, yet their hearts beat with the legendary, rhythmic fury of ancient heroes they had only read about in salvaged databases. Their self-appointed leader was Caleb. At just 16 years old, he carried himself with the heavy, unyielding gravitas of an old-world general. His eyes did not hold the hollow, submissive despair of the older generation. They burned with a sharp, dangerous defiance that no amount of ration line discipline could break. Beside him sat Chloe, a brilliant, self-taught coding prodigy who had learned to decipher the alien civilization's complex binary sequences using nothing but discarded electronic scraps and broken diagnostic monitors. There was Arthur, a quiet, brilliant young mind who understood the secrets of metallurgy and structural chemistry, a boy capable of turning industrial waste and toxic mine runoff into crude, functional weapons. And finally, The inseparable twin brothers, Sam and Alex, agile and fearless scouts who had memorized every single blind spot, patrol route, and camera sweep of the robotic guards in their sector. Caleb stands before a rough map of the Hive prison scratched directly into the frost covering the concrete floor. His voice low but carrying an intense, magnetic force that commands the room. He tells his friends to look at their parents, to look at the deep, systemic scars on their backs and the terrible emptiness in their eyes. He reminds them that the elders have forgotten what it actually feels like to be human, that they have been conditioned to think that mere survival in a cage is enough. But he fiercely declares that living like a beaten dog in an iron kennel is a fate far worse than dying on your feet in the open air. Arthur shakes his head slowly, his breath forming a thick cloud in the cold air, his hands tightly gripping a makeshift iron pipe. He reminds the group that the Sentinels are constructed from an advanced hyper-alloy, that human bones will break before they can even dent their armor, and that even if they somehow clear the heavy sector gates, the frost gorgon waiting in the perimeter will rip their bodies to shreds before they can run 100 yards. Chloe slams a heavily modified diagnostic terminal onto the metal desk with a fierce, confident smirk, countering that the robot's armor won't matter at all if the machines are completely blind. She reveals that she has spent 3 long years covertly tracking their main server frequencies during the midnight maintenance cycles, and she discovered a backdoor vulnerability. By injecting a custom override code into the sector's main junction box, she can force a localized system reboot, opening the heavy pneumatic gates for exactly 60 seconds while every single robot in the sector freezes in place. Caleb steps forward into the dim light, placing his scarred hand firmly in the center of the table, stating that 60 seconds is all the time they need to show the entire world that these cosmic gods can bleed. He notes that Arthur has successfully created a highly concentrated, volatile corrosive acid from the sulfurous mine runoff, meaning they do not need to pierce the monster's external crystalline armor because they will blind it and melt it from the inside out. He looks each of his friends in the eye, declaring that the very next night, when the seasonal blizzard hits its absolute peak and the external thermal sensors drop below the threshold of mechanical accuracy, they will strike for their families, for their ancestors, and for the honor of the earth. One by one, without a single word of hesitation, the teenagers placed their cold hands over Caleb's. They possessed no advanced body armor, no high-energy laser rifles, and no massive armies backing their play. They had only their shared brotherhood, their sharp, desperate intellect, and an unyielding, wild desire to see the true color of the sky. The clock on the main prison tower struck exactly 02:00 a.m. A monstrous, howling blizzard screamed through the industrial superstructure outside, rattling the heavy iron walls of Sector 4 until the rivets groaned. Inside the junction corridor, Chloe's fingers flew across the cracked keys of the modified alien terminal, her sweat freezing instantly into white frost on her forehead as she fought against the automated security firewalls. With a final, heavy slam of the enter key, she bypassed the final encryption layer. A sharp beep echoed through the hallway, and the crimson security lights of the prison suddenly flickered, sputtered, and turned dead black. The massive, hydraulic iron gates groaned loudly as their pressure seals broke, slowly parting open for the first time in decades. The bitter, biting, and lawless cold of the outside world rushed into the corridor like a roaring wave of needles. Caleb hissed for them to move now, and the 5 teenagers bolted through the threshold, their boots crunching loudly against the pristine, unforgiving snow of the outer perimeter. It was the first time any of them had ever stepped onto the actual, unyielding surface of the earth, but there was absolutely no time to marvel at the terrifying expanse of the dark valley. A deep, guttural roar shook the very air in their lungs as the frozen ground beneath them violently trembled. Out of the blinding white haze of the storm, the frost gorgon materialized like a phantom made of glaciers. It was a massive, towering wall of muscle and bone, covered in jagged plates of ice armor, its 3 crimson eyes glowing through the dark like embers from the deep pits of hell. Sensing the warmth of the biological intruders, the beast lunged forward with terrifying, predatory speed, its massive, razor-sharp claws sweeping through the freezing air. Sam screamed for everyone to scatter as the wind of the blow knocked him off his feet. The massive claw missed Caleb by mere inches, smashing instead into a heavy structural steel pillar and shattering the solid metal completely into twisted shards. The massive kinetic shockwave threw Alex violently across the snow, leaving him gasping for breath, coughing up bright red blood as his leg twisted beneath him at an unnatural, broken angle. Sam shrieked his brother's name in pure panic, trying to crawl through the drift toward him, but the monster turned its massive torso, raising its heavy, crystalline foot to crush the boy into a wet pulp against the ice. Caleb did not run. Instead, he charged forward into the shadow of the beast, his face contorted in a silent, furious battle cry. He roared for Arthur to use the canisters as he threw his entire body directly into the path of the descending foot, swinging a heavy, sharpened iron rod with all his might and jamming it deep into the soft, unprotected tendon tissue of the monster's lower knee joint. At that exact instant, Arthur slid daringly beneath the beast's massive, rumbling torso, tearing open the crude valves of the chemical canisters to spray the highly concentrated corrosive acid directly onto the beast's soft underbelly and exposed joints. A sickening, violent hiss echoed through the storm as the dark acid violently ate through the alien flesh, producing thick, white plumes of toxic smoke and making the frost gorgon shriek in pure, unadulterated agony. It stumbled heavily, its massive knee buckling under its own immense weight. Alex, dragging his broken, useless leg through the deep snow and absolutely refusing to die lying down in the dark, grabbed a fallen, jagged piece of the shattered steel pillar that lay beside him. With a final, desperate surge of pure adrenaline fueled by 50 years of suppressed human rage, he drove the sharp metal spike upward with both hands, directly into the monster's open, roaring mouth. Caleb leapt from the adjacent crate, grabbing the end of the protruding spike and using his entire body weight to drive it deeper, forcing the metal through the roof of the mouth and piercing the beast's central brainstem. The crimson glow in the monster's 3 eyes flickered, dimmed, and went completely dark. The massive, 30-foot terror crashed heavily into the snowbank, its thick, blue blood pouring out to permanently stain the pristine white wilderness. A single teenager, covered in sweat, black oil, and steaming blue blood, stood victoriously on top of the fallen beast's head. The unkillable god of the sky was dead, destroyed by the children of the cage. What Caleb and his young team did not know in that triumphant moment was that Chloe's clever system hack had done far more than just open the gates of Sector 4. It had automatically hijacked the Empire's internal security network, broadcasting the live video feed of their desperate struggle across the internal monitors of every single hive prison on the face of the planet. In America, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, billions of captive, broken humans watched the impossible play out in real time on their security screens. They saw a 16-year-old human boy, starved and cold, stand victoriously over the lifeless, bleeding corpse of the very monster that had terrorized their families for half a century. The heavy, submissive silence that had held humanity captive for 50 years broke in a single, collective, worldwide heartbeat. A mother looked down at her trembling, worn hands and found her grip on a heavy iron wrench. A father looked at his cowering, terrified son and suddenly found his lost courage buried deep beneath the ice. The realization swept across the entire globe like a roaring wildfire: if our children can make these gods bleed, then we can make them die. An old laborer in the deep industrial pits stood up from his machine, dropped his heavy mining tool, and raised his scarred fist toward the security cameras, screaming for the revolution to live forever. The global rebellion did not just start. It exploded into a primal, unstoppable, and furious flood of long-delayed human vengeance. In a matter of hours, millions of prisoners bypassed the frozen, rebooting Sentinels. They did not wait for high-tech weaponry to be delivered. They used their bare hands, heavy mining hammers, crowbars, and massive industrial machinery to tear the automated guards apart limb from limb, ripping out their glowing central processing chips and smashing their optical sensors. The frost gorgons stationed outside the walls were completely overwhelmed as a literal sea of angry, roaring humans threw themselves onto the monsters without regard for their own safety. hacking the beasts down through sheer, unyielding numbers and absolute, collective fury. The historic hunters of Earth had officially become the hunted. By the time the cold dawn broke over the horizon, the grand, high-tech alien system that had easily enslaved the planet for 50 years lay shattered into a million useless pieces, melting away in deep pools of blue alien blood and black synthetic oil. But the masters of the cosmos, watching from the upper atmosphere, would not allow their labor force to revolt so easily. The thick sky above the clouds suddenly turned a deep, unnatural, and bruised purple as the Zeta-Alpha Imperial dreadnought descended into the lower atmosphere. It was a terrifying, apocalyptic vessel, so unimaginably massive that its metallic hull cast a permanent shadow over entire countries. Its central underbelly glowing with a devastating, unstable plasma energy capable of cracking planetary continents in half. The grand holographic projection of the alien High Commander appeared across the sky, his synthesized voice booming through the clouds like continuous thunder, calling humans nothing but insolent, short-lived worms who had broken their tools and foolishly slaughtered their beasts. He coldly warned the population that while they believed they had won their freedom, they had actually only secured their absolute, systematic extinction because the Imperial fleet would now erase their cities from the map, burn their frozen oceans into steam, and leave the entire planet as a barren, dead rock floating in space. The secondary warships descended in perfect military formation, unleashing a merciless, blinding rain of crimson laser fire upon the open cities. The human rebellion, armed only with primitive hand tools and stolen scraps of metal, was brutally and instantly pushed back as thousands of resistance fighters died in a matter of minutes. The sheer, unyielding technological gap between the two civilizations was devastating. Caleb and the surviving remnants of the global resistance force were eventually cornered in a massive enclosed mountain valley, surrounded on all sides by burning debris and melting ice, watching the alien ground forces close in for the final, systematic slaughter. But destiny has a strange, unpredictable way of balancing the scales when humanity is pushed to the absolute brink. In a desperate, self-sacrificial move, a small group of rogue human engineers who had captured an orbital monitoring station managed to hijack an old automated defense satellite system, turning its heavy, experimental plasma laser inward to target the command ship's escort fleet directly. A massive, blinding explosion rocked the upper atmosphere, and a magnificent, golden-hulled royal frigate, detached from the main fleet by the sheer force of the blast, took a direct hit to its thruster matrix. It spiraled completely out of control through the clouds, trailing a long ribbon of white fire and thick black smoke, before crashing violently into the snowy floor of the valley, sliding for a mile until it came to a halt right in front of the human resistance line. Human soldiers, their faces hardened with hatred and covered in the soot of battle, immediately surrounded the smoking, crumpled wreckage with their weapons raised, ready to kill whatever crawled out. From the shattered escape pod, a single figure slowly crawled onto the snow. It was not a soldier, nor a commander, but the High Queen of Zeta-Alpha herself, who had traveled along with the fleet to personally oversee the final chemical harvesting phase of the conquest. Her physical body was elegant and imposing, covered in a shimmering, luminescent golden armor that pulsed with bioenergy, her head adorned with a heavy crystalline crown. But right now, she was completely helpless. Her left arm was entirely severed at the shoulder, her beautiful golden armor was shattered into sharp shards, and deep, glowing blue blood poured continuously from her wounds into the white snow. She fell face first onto the ice, gasping heavily for air, looking up at the hundreds of dirty, blood-stained humans surrounding her with weapons aimed directly at her chest. A veteran soldier shouted through the wind to kill her immediately because her empire had murdered his entire family, demanding her head be cut off as a trophy, while a weeping mother holding a dead child screamed to let her feel the exact same agonizing pain that humans had felt for 50 long years. The angry mob readied their weapons to tear the royal alien to pieces. The queen slowly closed her eyes, awaiting the brutal, messy end, knowing full well that her species had never shown these creatures a single shred of mercy. An authoritative, Loud young voice suddenly pierced through the collective rage of the mob, commanding everyone to stop where they stood. Caleb stepped forward through the crowd, placing his own scarred body directly between the angry, weapon-wielding soldiers and the bleeding, terrified queen. He lowered his makeshift metal sword toward the ground, refusing to strike. Arthur yelled with shaking hands from the front line, asking if Caleb had lost his mind, since this creature was the primary monster behind their entire suffering, the ruler whose direct imperial commands had starved and enslaved their people for generations. Caleb looked down at the fallen queen, who was visibly trembling with shallow, terrified breaths, looking incredibly small, broken, and fragile against the vast, cold expanse of the snow. He turned his back to the enemy to face the millions of human eyes watching him through the resistance web, asking his people if they killed an unarmed, dying enemy in the cold, what the true difference would be between humanity and the monsters they fought. He reminded them that the aliens had come to their world to steal their physical resources and try to destroy their very souls by turning them into unfeeling, cold, and brutal killers just like themselves. But he passionately asserted that if humans lost their core humanity on this day, the aliens would truly win the war without firing another shot. Taking a deep, shaking breath and looking down at his own blood-stained hands, he declared to the crowd that human strength had never been defined merely by how brutally they could fight, but by how deeply they could feel, and because they were human, they would choose to heal the defeated instead of torturing them. The massive crowd went completely silent as the sheer, unexpected weight of his words struck a deep chord in their collective hearts. The murderous anger slowly drained away from the soldiers' faces, replaced by a profound, tearful, and quiet realization of who they were. Caleb knelt down in the freezing snow beside his enemy, took off his own thick, warm woolen shawl, the only comfort he possessed, and gently draped it over the shivering, bleeding queen before calling loudly into the line for Dr. Vance and a trauma medical kit. In a makeshift, underground field hospital set up inside a half-destroyed concrete bunker, Dr. Vance and a team of dedicated human nurses worked through the night under the dim, flickering light of portable generators. They used their own scarce, carefully hoarded human medical supplies, their own blood transfusions, and their own physical warmth to save the failing life of the very person who had kept them in chains. Caleb sat quietly by her bedside for hours without sleeping, gently wiping the glowing blue blood from her brow with a damp cloth and offering her clean, pure water whenever she drifted into consciousness. The queen slowly opened her beautiful, luminous eyes and looked around at the primitive, clicking monitoring machines hooked to her skin. She saw a human woman gently adjusting her blankets, smiling softly at her despite the deep, visible scars on her own face, and she saw Caleb sitting quietly in the corner, watching over her safety like a silent guardian. In her rigid, empire culture, the weak were always discarded to save resources and enemies were utterly eradicated without thought, meaning she had never once in her long life experienced the concept of empathy or unconditional love. A single, glowing blue tear rolled down her alien cheek as the absolute moral superiority of the human spirit shattered her worldview completely. Outside the heavy concrete bunker, the 1-hour ultimatum delivered by the fleet was rapidly running out. The sky above the valley grew thick and dark with thousands of alien fighter ships hovering in tight formation, their heavy weapons primed to incinerate the entire continent with a single command, and the High Commander's voice boomed through the speakers once more, demanding the immediate return of their queen or face total, irreversible annihilation. The heavy bunker doors slowly ground open, and Caleb walked out alone into the clearing, manually pushing the wounded queen in a rusted, mechanical wheelchair. The entire alien fleet instantly calibrated their targeting systems, locking thousands of bright red laser dots directly onto Caleb's chest and forehead. Caleb stopped dead in the center of the snowy clearing, stepped back to completely unlink her metal restraints, and told her softly that she was healed, she was whole, and she was entirely free to go back to her own people. The Queen's elite royal guard rushed forward from a landing craft, lifting her gently into a transport vessel while the High Commander looked down from his viewport with a cruel, victorious smile, calling the humans foolish, sentimental creatures whose weakness had just cost them their lives. But before he could issue the final order to open fire and cleanse the valley, the Queen's powerful voice suddenly echoed across every single military channel and encryption frequency on the planet, commanding her entire fleet to hold their fire. She stood tall at the bow of her transport ship, her voice amplified across the entire atmosphere, telling her vast fleet to look upon the very creatures they had arrogantly called primitives and cattle for 50 years. She revealed to her entire military force that humans possess a divine grace, a fierce and beautiful light that their own advanced civilization had lost millennia ago in their pursuit of cold efficiency. She pointed out to her commanders that even though these humans had bled for 50 years under their iron fist, they chose to give her their own blood, their own scarce medicine, and their own physical warmth when she fell helpless into their hands. She fiercely declared to the High Council that destroying a species this noble would be the greatest, most unforgivable crime in the history of the cosmic universe. Suddenly, a loud, panicked, and distorted transmission from the Prime Minister of the Galactic Council interrupted the Queen's emotional broadcast, screaming from their distant home planet that the Empire had just suffered a catastrophic, absolute systems breach. The High Commander frowned deeply, stating into his console that Earth was completely cornered and under their total control. But the Prime Minister screamed back through the static that while the fleet was focusing all their sensors on the valley, a small team of human teenagers inside Sector 4 had used the Queen's crashed frigate's open mainframe to completely backward engineer their entire planetary defense matrix. He revealed to the horrified fleet that the humans had uploaded a global, self-replicating virus through the quantum network, putting every single Sentinel robot on the face of the Earth under total human control, along with every chemical extraction plant, orbital weapons satellite, and heavy dreadnought override code. He terrified the commanders by warning them that if the fleet fired a single laser shot at the valley, the humans now possessed more than enough automated firepower to lock onto their defenseless home planet and turn Zeta-Alpha into a cloud of drifting stardust. Caleb looked up at the darkened sky with a calm, perfectly confident smile as thousands of massive alien Sentinel robots slowly rose from the surrounding ridges behind him, their mechanical eyes turning from cold, automated blue to a fierce, burning human orange, their heavy plasma weapons aimed directly up at the underbellies of the alien warships. The global tables hadn't just been turned, the humans had completely checkmated the entire interstellar empire by using their brilliant, unstoppable intellect to quietly seize the entire galactic arsenal while the aliens were completely distracted by their own pride and arrogance. The High Commander looked down at his primary command console, which was completely locked out, his inputs frozen as the monitors flashed with a single line of translated text stating the system was now fully seized by the Republic of Earth. He looked down through the viewport at Caleb, finally realizing that this hairless primate species was truly the most terrifying force in the galaxy. Not because they were exceptionally brutal, but because they were brilliant, endlessly adaptable, and fiercely united in their love for one another. The High Queen stepped forward to the edge of her vessel's ramp, looking down at Caleb one last time through the winter air, and slowly bowed her head in deep, genuine reverence to a superior spirit. She spoke into the global channel, accepting their total defeat and promising that the forces of Zeta-Alpha would leave Earth immediately, never to return to this system, leaving behind all their infrastructure as a small, material penance for the suffering they had caused. The massive, continent-sized dreadnoughts slowly turned their hulls around, their massive sub-light thrusters igniting with a dull roar as they vanished into the dark, silent void of deep space, taking their 50 years of tyranny away with them forever. But as their final ships cleared the upper atmosphere, they released a massive, global burst of stored thermal energy from their weather modifiers, neutralizing the artificial ice age in a single, sweeping wave of warmth. The thick, oppressive black clouds that had choked the sky for 2 generations finally parted away, and the heavy sheets of ice on the ground began to crack, shatter, and melt into rushing, beautiful rivers of clear water, while fresh green grass erupted from the long dormant soil and wild flowers bloomed across the valleys in a stunning, instantaneous time lapse of life. Then, a bright, blinding, and beautiful golden ray of pure light hit the damp ground. The sun had finally returned to its children. Across the entire globe, billions of liberated people fell to their knees in the mud. Strong, hardened miners broke down sobbing like infants, burying their dirty faces into the fresh, warm earth they had fought for, while ecstatic mothers lifted their young children high into the air to let the golden sunlight wash over their faces for the very first time in their lives. The old grandfather in Sector 4 walked out of the iron gates into the open field, tears streaming down his wrinkled face, holding his grandson's small hand as they both bathed in the glorious, healing warmth of the day, telling the child with a laughing sob that they were finally, truly free. On top of a beautiful, greening hill overlooking the melting valley, Caleb, Chloe, Arthur, Sam, and Alex stood tightly side by side. The warm, fresh wind brushed gently through their hair as the golden sun illuminated their young faces. They held each other's hands tightly, looking out together at the beautiful, reborn canvas of the earth. They had broken the ice, they had conquered the gods, and they had saved their world, not by losing what made them human, but by showing the entire universe its true, terrifying, and beautiful power.
So guys, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed making for you. If you liked it, please smash that like button and share this video with your friends. Also, let me know your favorite part in the comments below. I love reading your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.